Good afternoon, Frank.
I'm Professor Stoner.
Very interesting what's going on in the news the last couple of days. And I think the Washington Post caught this first. And it all has to do with Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg and how Facebook is managed and how it should be managed, and whether or not the fact that Trump won the election was Facebook's fault or not. But I think this is something that is very much related to the process of globalization and to the aspects of that process which nobody yet understands. And that is that the larger the number of people who interact with each other, the more the results become uncontrollable. And according to what I've read about this, 2 billion people are in regular contact on Facebook. Now, of course, they don't all contact all of the others, but it means that the amount of interaction is such that anything that gets on there is going to circulate over quickly and over an enormous area. And nothing like that has ever been possible before, even though there were similar changes on a much smaller scale, with starting in the 19th century with the telegraph, and then the telephone, and then wireless, and so on. And then, of course, the World Wide Web, well, digitization of the internet in the 70s, and then the World Wide Web in the 90s. But social media and the way social media have developed in the last decade have taken it to a new level. And I mean, this is something that I keep coming back to, and I think it's worth spending a few minutes on it today, that we're a social species. We only think about ourselves individually, but in fact, what it means to be human changes according to the number of people who are human together. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things that I tell my students is, if the only people you talk to are your parents and your family, then you know what they're going to say before they say it, because you know them so well. And so you really don't have to listen to what they're going to say, because you know. But then you go to school, and all of a sudden you're in a much larger environment, and you hear new ideas, because each person has a different life experience. Mm-hmm. And then as you go through life, you come into contact with larger and larger numbers of people. And this social media development over the last decade has taken this to a level that nobody's really ready for.
Well, it's funny, because what you just outlined, I mean, I'm using this only as an example. I don't mean to get into a religious discussion. But if I was God in the Garden of Eden, and I was projecting out a path for humankind, I would say something along the lines of what you just said. You are born into your family, you interact with them, then you move out from your family and talk to other close people, whether they be relatives, then move out to the next concentric circle and speak to them, whether they be acquaintances and friends and so on, over the course of your life. And that enriches and fulfills the human experience. What's happened now with Facebook is this has come on like a freight train out of left field, so to speak, that it has accelerated this process, and in many ways it's perverted this process, because you have people. I mean, you referred to the statistics of 2 billion people daily interacting on Facebook. There's another statistic too that I don't want to cite because I don't quite have it right, but it's a flabbergasting number. The number of minutes per day that the average user is on Facebook. Many times it's more than 2 or 3 hours a day, who are people living in this self-contained universe of social interactivity, which I'm not making a judgment. It's neither bad nor good, but it's certainly something different.
But the point is that, as we've said before, the biggest problem in globalization as it progresses is organization.
Mm-hmm.
And because we have no models of organization beyond the national level, and everything international we have at the moment really is secondary to anything that's national. But we're now moving from a situation in which we have, 7.5 billion world population, half of whom live in large urban communities, over half now. And within a few decades, it's going to be 10 billion people, and everybody in cities, or not absolutely everybody, but certainly the vast majority, well over half, probably around 3/4. And we don't even have good models of government for cities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and the models of government we have for what we know as nation states, which is the main model for the whole world, is not working so well now as it appeared to work in the early part of the 20th century.
Right, right.
So organization, we can see from this what Facebook is now being accused of, that we've got to think in terms of how to manage public now, what do I say? I don't mean to say we've got to tell people what to think, but we've got to somehow make sure that as new ideas become more and more frequent and interesting and what should I say, negative as well as positive, that we know how to manage the consequences.
Well, that's sort of where I was hoping you'd go, because one of the things that I think Facebook really accentuates is the lack of experiential knowledge and education, the decreasing level of experiential knowledge and education in the United States in particular, right? That's occurring. So as a result, there's a gullibility factor that is no longer, I think, described as gullibility, because it's more of a referral of information from quote unquote friends, whether they be digital friends or actual friends. And people believe what they hear if it comes from a source they trust. And there's a level of digital trust now that I don't think sociologists foresaw. They never, I'm not a sociologist, but I never understood that this was coming. Even 5 years ago, I would have scoffed at it, but no longer. So as a result, you've got these tens of millions of people who are in social media systems, many of whom perhaps are not as aware as they could be, and as a result take information in a fairly unvarnished method on Facebook and other types of sites and believe it. And therein begins a whole cascade of difficulties, which is a big problem. And I don't know that the institutions are set up for that. As you just referred to, what we are bordering on talking about is how to better educate people so that they understand what's not right and what's incorrect and what is true and what isn't true.
It's amazing. The amazing thing about it is that although not everybody in the world is on Facebook, people from all different sectors of society, levels of society,
it's
classes,
unbelievable,
occupations, and so on. It's really amazing the different types of people you find. And up until the beginning of social media like Facebook, people didn't interact between different classes of the society. So the different levels of society that were active in the organization of society and in government and managing the economy and so on, had their own culture and managed things at a certain level. And now they're all talking to everybody else at different levels.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so. It's as though although we're going from a global population from what was it? Not so long ago, in the second half of the 20th century, it was only 4 billion,
Right.
because it's risen very fast in the last few decades. So it's not just from 4 billion to 10 billion. It's from a lot of different arenas of social interaction, of different types of people that were separate in the second half of the 20th century, and now all together in one enormous arena of 10 billion.
Right, and it's rare, and I'll just tell you this, I don't want to ask you the question, but it's rare to find somebody who is not on Facebook. It's free. It's a way to put your picture up there so your friends can see your picture, and you can look at their pictures and see how they've aged over the years, where you can casually keep in touch with them and mark the progress of their life without having to call them or engage in conversation with them. It's a really peculiar dynamic when you take a step back and look at it. I mean, I'm not entirely sure that it's completely healthy either.
Well, the next question, of course, is everything changes. Facebook has been amazingly successful. And I think the success of Facebook demonstrates that human beings will always interact in larger numbers if they have the chance.
That's true.
And as the numbers have got larger and larger, the way Facebook works has been changing. How's it going to change in the next 10 years? That's the sort of thing that people should be getting ready for. Mm-hmm. And looking at. But so far as I know, from what I've seen, the study of social media generally, and let alone this particular question, which I think is very important, is there's very little of it. There's very little written that's serious research on the way social media is changing human society.
And that's a big gap. I think it's too soon. People haven't really digested it yet. And for example, I doubt very much we could have been having this conversation 2 years ago.
No.
I mean, and that's a speck of a second in the terms of academic study, so to speak.
Yeah.
So and it's even a smaller speck of a second in terms of effect on humankind as a whole. And it may be that 100 years from now, in history books, this is looked back at the time when, quote unquote, social media exploded onto mankind and various things began to unfold and happen. And one of the first things that they're going to point to is the U.S. election in 2016 as to how social media, rightly or wrongly, affected this through whatever levers are going to be proven to have been pulled.
And the final question that we should probably finish with is it going to make any difference to our ability to manage North Korea or the climate?
I can't see that.
Well, it all has to do with what the human society can do in managing itself and in managing its environment.
Yeah, but the thing is, Brian, all right, it is such a potential source for good. All right, if you could just imagine back in 1967 when you were writing your doctoral thesis, all right, if you could have imagined some sort of a system that could tie in 2 billion people, 30% of the population of the world, on some real-time kind of system where they could see and understand what you're typing and writing and even talk to them. Think of where you could have gone with that as a force for good to try to more coherently bring together society, advance humanity. I'm pretty sure that, and I'm going to be the optimist now, I'm pretty sure that over a brief period of time, humanity will figure out a way to make this as a very positive thing and use it as a force.
Well, I'm also like you, the optimist, but I think that the justification for this optimism is that this is the largest number of minds that have ever been in contact with each other, and so we're getting the largest number of new ideas, And so the chances of us being able to solve problems is getting better and better.
Well,
Even though in November 2016, it may have led to the election of Trump.
that could be a small price to pay for the upside involved here. It could be. It could be. Well, I will be on the ground in France trying to detect the supposed negativity against Emmanuel Macron, which I will report back on in 2 weeks' time to you and tell you what the view is from over there. So,
Okay.
all right, Brian, thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.